I didn't take it, Mr. Watson. Please, you have to believe me. LaToya Robinson's voice cracked like glass underfoot, barely rising above the low hum of gasps and clinking glasses. The chandelier overhead swayed slightly, casting flickering shadows across the faces of the rich and rehearsed. Moments earlier, the Watson estate was echoing with laughter, a string quartet playing in the corner, and champagne flowing like joy itself. But now it was silent, cold, heavy. Fred Watson stood at the center of it all, one hand still holding Caitlin's, the other twitching at his side. Caitlin clutched her wrist dramatically, her eyes wide, wet and calculating. "It was right here," she whispered to the circle of guests around her. "My mother gave it to me before she passed. The clasp never even came undone. A $50,000 diamond bracelet, an heirloom, gone." And standing in the middle of the room, wearing her blue janitor uniform, was LaToya, with her 6-year-old daughter, Kimmy, hiding behind her, arms wrapped tightly around her waist. She didn't do it. Kimmy cried out suddenly, her tiny voice cracking through the tension like thunder in a summer sky. "Daddy," she didn't take it. Fred's eyes, once so sure, so steady, flickered with uncertainty. His daughter's voice cut deeper than any accusation, but so did the silence that followed. Guests looked away. Some sipped nervously, others whispered, and Caitlin sobbed harder. Security in black suits began to close in. LaToya didn't move. She couldn't. Not with every eye in the room, weighing her down like chains. Her heart pounded, not just from fear, but from something deeper. Shame. Humiliation, the sharp sting of betrayal from a man she had trusted, a man she had once prayed for. "LaToya," Fred's voice was low, careful. "Maybe it's best if you leave, until this is all sorted out." It was like being pushed off a cliff in slow motion. She glanced down at Kimmy, who stared up at her with tear-filled eyes, looking for answers she didn't have. LaToya bent down and whispered, "It's okay, baby. God sees. He knows." Psalm 34 verse 18 whispered in her spirit, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." And right there, in front of people who never really saw her, LaToya straightened her back, not with pride, but with the quiet strength of someone who walks with God. She took Kimmy's hand, nodded to the guard, and walked toward the door. Behind her, the music was long gone. So was the laughter. But something else had entered the room. A stillness. A question. Maybe even conviction. Because deep in that room of lies and luxury, the truth hadn't just disappeared with the bracelet. It had walked out in a janitor's uniform, holding the hand of a little girl who still believed. Before we continue, if this story already has your heart stirring even just a little, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more faith-filled stories like this, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. We'd love to know. Now let's dive right back into the story. Rain traced lines down the cracked windows of LaToya's third-floor apartment, the same way tears had stained her daughter's cheeks on the ride home. The soft hum of traffic outside did nothing to quiet the storm inside her heart. She slipped out of her wet shoes, her uniform still damp and clinging to her skin. The room smelled like lavender from the diffuser she'd set earlier, but even that familiar comfort couldn't wash away the shame clinging to her like smoke. Kimmy was already asleep, curled up on their old corduroy couch with her favorite stuffed lion tucked under her chin. She cried until her small body gave out, whispering over and over again. She didn't even look scared, Mommy. Caitlin wasn't scared at all. LaToya brushed a damp curl off her daughter's forehead and pressed her lips to her temple. "I know, baby," she whispered, voice cracking. "I saw it too." She walked into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. Her gaze landed on the photo on the dresser. Kimmy, age 3, smiling wide at the zoo, her arms stretched toward the camera like she was trying to catch the whole world. That photo had gotten her through so many 3 a.m. floor scrubs and silent tears in the Watsons' laundry room. But tonight it felt like it wasn't enough. The way Fred looked at her, not with disbelief, but with distance, like he'd already made up his mind. "Lord," she exhaled, "you said no weapon formed against me shall prosper. But this one feels like it already has." She bowed her head, the words slipping out quietly. "Please, Jesus, be my defender. I don't have anyone else." Back at the Watson estate, the rain tapped gently on the windows like it was too polite to interrupt. Inside, Caitlin nestled into Fred's chest, her sobs soft and perfectly timed. I don't feel safe knowing she was around Kimmy like that," she whispered. "She's been stealing your trust for months, Fred. And now this." Fred rubbed his temples. The room still smelled like roses and champagne, but the joy had long dried up. He looked down at the engagement ring on Caitlin's hand, and the storm behind his eyes settled into a quiet, guilty fog. "I just want to protect what we're building," she said. "Our image, our future." Fred nodded slowly. "You're right." But as she leaned into him, a shadow flickered in the back of his mind, the look in LaToya's eyes. Not anger, not defiance, pain. Back in the apartment, LaToya reached for her Bible. Pages worn, spine cracked like her. She let fall open, eyes landing on Isaiah 54 verse 17. "No weapon that is formed against thee shall prosper, and every tongue that shall rise against thee in judgment thou shalt condemn." Her hands trembled as she whispered, "I believe you, even when it hurts." Thunder rolled in the distance, and in the shadows of the Watson mansion, Caitlin poured herself a glass of wine, her smile sharp, knowing full well what she'd hidden upstairs. The eggs on Kimmy's plate had gone cold. She sat at the big marble island in the Watson kitchen, feet dangling off the bar stool, her pink slippers swinging back and forth in slow circles. Caitlin had tried to butter her toast, tried to call her sweet pea. But Kimmy didn't say a word. She waited until her father finally came down, tie crooked, eyes tired. Fred leaned over and kissed the top of her head. "Morning, baby." Kimmy looked up at him. "Daddy, why don't you believe Miss LaToya?" The question landed like a stone in his chest. He sat beside her, running a hand through his hair. "Some things are complicated, sweetheart." Kimmy's eyebrows pulled together. "No, they're not. Truth isn't complicated." Fred opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. He looked over at Caitlin, who stood frozen by the sink, her back turned, coffee mug trembling ever so slightly in her hand. Later that night, the house was silent except for the whisper of wind through the trees. Fred and Caitlin were downstairs, arguing in low voices she couldn't quite make out. Kimmy lay in her bed, eyes wide open, the stuffed lion curled under her chin. Miss LaToya once told her, "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even when you are." She sat up slowly, slipped out from under her blanket. The wood floor was cold on her feet, but her heart was warm with something fierce. She crept down the hallway toward Caitlin's room. The door creaked when she opened it. Moonlight spilled across the floor, revealing soft carpets and expensive perfumes lined up like soldiers on a vanity. The room smelled too sweet, too clean, like someone trying to hide something. She tiptoed toward the mirror where Caitlin always checked her makeup. Something caught her eye behind the frame, a tiny corner of paper sticking out. Kimmy reached up, hands trembling just a little, and pulled it free. A folded note. She opened it, slowly sounding out the words like Miss LaToya had taught her. "Payment received from K. Hudson. Amount for $1,500. To D. Harper. Services rendered, event consulting, discreet coordination. Kimmy's brow furrowed. She didn't know what discreet meant, but she remembered seeing Caitlin whispering to that man with the clipboard, Mr. Daniel, before the party. And she remembered how nervous Caitlin looked going up the stairs alone. She folded the note back up, tucked it into her pajama pocket, and tiptoed back to her room. Before climbing back into bed, she knelt beside it the way Miss Latoya showed her. "Jesus," she whispered, "please help Daddy see the truth. I'm just a little kid, but I know she didn't do it. I know you know too." A soft peace settled over her small shoulders, like a blanket no one could take away. And downstairs, Caitlin poured another glass of wine, unaware that a child had just found the first crack in her perfect lie. The knock on the door was soft, barely there. Latoya wiped her hands on a dish towel and peeked through the peephole. Her breath caught. Kimmy stood in the hallway, soaked from head to toe, her backpack drooping off one shoulder, curls clinging to her cheeks, rain dripping from her eyelashes. Latoya flung the door open. "Kimmy." The little girl didn't speak at first. She just threw her arms around Latoya's waist and held on tight, like she was trying to glue herself back together. "They said bad things about you," Kimmy whispered, "but I know you didn't do it." Latoya knelt, wrapping her arms around her. She was wet, shivering, barely a child, carrying the weight of something much too big. "Oh, baby girl, you can't be here. Your daddy's gonna be worried sick." Kimmy pulled back, eyes fierce and glistening. "He doesn't listen. She's lying, Miss Latoya. I heard her. She was on the phone with a man. She said he'll never believe her. She was talking about you." Latoya closed her eyes. Her chest ached with love, fear, and something else, that old, familiar ache of injustice. She looked to the ceiling. "Lord, what am I supposed to do with this?" She got Kimmy into dry clothes, one of her old T-shirts tied with a rubber band, and made some hot cocoa. The girl clung to the mug like it was a shield. Latoya didn't ask more questions. She just sat beside her on the couch, rubbing her back and praying under her breath. Hours passed. Then came the pounding on the door. 3 heavy knocks. Latoya opened it to see Fred, rain-soaked, panicked, and flanked by a security guard. His eyes scanned the room, landing on Kimmy. "Sweetheart," he breathed, stepping forward, dropping to his knees. "What were you thinking? I've been looking everywhere." "She came here on her own," Latoya said, hands raised. "I didn't even know." "You took my daughter?" Fred's voice was sharp now, accusing, defensive. "I didn't take anyone." Latoya snapped, heart racing. "She knocked on my door. Alone. In the rain. She's lying, Daddy." Kimmy shouted, scrambling off the couch. Her voice cracked. "Caitlin is lying. I heard her." The room went still. Fred stood slowly. His face had drained of color. Rainwater dripped from his hair onto the floor, but he didn't move. "I heard her," Kimmy said again, quieter now. "She said you'd never believe Miss Latoya." Fred's eyes flicked from his daughter to Latoya, then to the guard behind him. Something cracked in him, small and visible but real. Kimmy stepped forward, tiny fists clenched. "You always told me to tell the truth. Why won't you believe me now?" Fred swallowed hard. He didn't have an answer. Latoya looked up toward the ceiling again, her prayer unspoken but heavy in the room. "God, give him ears to hear." Caitlin stared at her phone, jaw clenched. The screen lit up again. Daniel Harper, 3 missed calls. 1 voicemail. She didn't listen. She knew what he'd say. More demands. More threats wrapped in polite business lingo. She had promised him the last payment by Monday. But Fred had started asking questions. The mask was slipping. In the Watson home, Things weren't quite as polished anymore. Kimmy wouldn't come near her, wouldn't even look at her. And Fred, he was growing distant, distracted. "Why is there a $4,500 transfer to a D. Harper?" he asked over coffee, holding up a printed statement. "And what's this charge at a hotel in Midtown? You said you were at the spa that weekend." Caitlin blinked, trying to summon the tears, but her well of fake emotions was running dry. You know how billing gets. Maybe it got routed through. Fred didn't respond. He just walked out of the room, leaving the statement on the counter. Meanwhile, across town, LaToya sat in her apartment, surrounded by the quiet ache of survival. Bills stacked on the table. 3 job applications rejected in 2 days. "Sorry, we've decided to go with another candidate. Your background didn't meet our standards at this time." She could hear it in their voices, the pause when they saw her name, the silent judgment she couldn't erase. Caitlin had poisoned every room before she even walked into it. But LaToya wasn't broken. She was done being silent. She didn't want revenge. She wanted restoration. That night, after tucking Kimmy into bed, she stood by her dresser and picked up the photo. The one of her daughter laughing in the sun. Her reason. Her anchor. She knelt beside the bed and laid the photo gently on the blanket. "Lord," she whispered, "I don't have power. I don't have money. I don't have friends in high places. But I know you see me. You said you are a refuge for the oppressed. You said you prepare a table in the presence of our enemies. So I'm asking you, let the truth speak for itself. Let's shout where I've been silenced." A soft breeze moved through the cracked window, just enough to lift the corner of the photo, just enough to remind her she wasn't alone. And back in the Watson estate, Caitlin's hands trembled as her phone buzzed again. "Daniel Harper, if I go down, you're going with me." "I'm not asking you to come back for me," Fred said, standing in the doorway with his suitcase half zipped. "It's for Kimmy. I'm going to be gone 3 days, and she keeps asking for you." LaToya hesitated, her keys still in hand. She'd come only to drop off Kimmy's library books, nothing more. But the look in Fred's eyes wasn't pride. It was guilt, and maybe something deeper, something cracking. "Just stay until I get back," he added. "Please. She sleeps better when you're here." In the background, Caitlin stood with a smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Of course," she purred, brushing imaginary lint from Fred's jacket. "It's the right thing for Kimmy." LaToya met her gaze. No words, just a long silence that said everything. That night, after Fred left for the airport, the mansion fell quiet. Too quiet. Caitlin's heels echoed through the halls like a countdown. She walked past the kitchen, then doubled back, then again. Later, LaToya noticed the envelope of house petty cash missing from the drawer in the office. The next morning, the gold ring that usually sat on the edge of the upstairs bathroom counter was gone. "Have you seen my ring?" Caitlin asked sweetly over breakfast, her voice a velvet blade. "It was just there yesterday." LaToya said nothing. She knew the game. Kimmy watched from across the table, her cereal untouched. That afternoon, she tugged gently on LaToya's sleeve as they folded laundry together. "Why is she watching you all the time?" Kimmy whispered. LaToya paused, folding a towel slowly. "Because people who lie," she said softly, "think everyone else does too." Kimmy looked up at her, eyes wide and honest. "You don't lie." "I try not to," LaToya said, "but sometimes the truth has to wait. Even Jesus had to stay silent before people finally saw who he really was." Later that evening, LaToya knelt in the guest room, Bible open on her lap. She read quietly, "For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil." Ecclesiastes 12 verse 14. She closed her eyes. Lord, I'm walking in light. Help me stay in it, even when the darkness plays tricks. Outside the room, Caitlin stood just beyond the door, listening. Her fingers curled around the small velvet box in her palm, the one she'd plant in LaToya's bag the next day. She smiled to herself. Quiet, calculated, but in the corner of the hallway, a shadow moved. Small feet in soft socks. Kimmy had seen it all. And while Caitlin plotted behind closed doors, a little girl with a lion heart was slowly collecting every lie like puzzle pieces, waiting for the light. The day had started like any other. LaToya moved quietly through the Watson estate, humming low under her breath as she dusted Caitlin's room. She wasn't sure why she agreed to come back again, but Kimmy's arms around her waist the night before had something to do with it. So did the prayer she whispered before stepping through the front door. Lord, if there's truth to uncover, help me see it. As she straightened a stack of papers in the drawer near Caitlin's vanity, something small slid loose. A USB drive. It was labeled in Caitlin's crisp handwriting. Private. LaToya looked toward the hallway. Silence. Her fingers hesitated. Then, steady, she slipped the drive into the house laptop and clicked open the first folder. Bank statements. Large transfers. Fred's business account names. Thousands wired to D. Harper Consulting. The same Daniel Fred had trusted to plan their wedding. The same man Caitlin whispered to before everything fell apart. Her chest tightened. This could change everything. She clicked to save the files when the bedroom door slammed open behind her. Caitlin, her eyes locked on the laptop screen. What are you doing? She hissed, rushing forward. That's private. You're stealing from me again. I wasn't stealing, LaToya said, standing quickly. I found this. I was going to. Caitlin grabbed the USB from the laptop with a snarl. Thief! Her scream echoed down the hall. Moments later, Fred came running up the stairs, briefcase still in hand. What's going on? She was snooping in my things. Caitlin wailed, tears already streaking her mascara. I let her in again, and she violated my trust. This is harassment. LaToya tried to speak, but the room spun. The USB was gone. The files were closed. Her words caught in her throat. Fred looked at her, face tired, eyes dulled by too many long nights and too many twisted stories. LaToya, I don't know what to believe anymore. I didn't touch a thing that wasn't already broken, she said, voice shaking but firm. I think it's best if you go, he said, sighing. Kimmy stood at the top of the stairs, her hand clenched around her stuffed lion. She saw everything. That night, while Caitlin paced the kitchen downstairs, whispering frantically into her phone, Kimmy sat quietly in her room. She tucked her tablet behind her bear earlier that afternoon, just like Miss LaToya taught her to tuck away treasures. Its little green light blinked softly from the shelf, recording every whispered word. She found the drive. I told you to delete it. Caitlin hissed. He has no idea, but she's getting too close. We'll figure something out. Just keep quiet. Kimmy didn't blink. She reached for her lion and pulled it close. Jesus, please help Daddy see what I see. Downstairs, the lie kept spinning, but in one small room, truth was finally waking up, and it had a witness. Morning sunlight spilled across the Watson estate like grace, soft, golden, and uninvited. Fred stood near the fireplace, brows furrowed, arms crossed. Caitlin perched tensely on the edge of the velvet couch, her fingers twitching against her coffee mug. LaToya stood quietly by the stairs, uncertain why Kimmy had asked everyone to come, but trusting the same voice that had carried her through storm after storm. Kimmy sat cross-legged on the rug, her stuffed lion in her lap, her tablet resting in front of her like a tiny courtroom bench. "Daddy," she said, her voice soft but sure, "I want you to hear something." Fred looked at her, then at LaToya, then back to Caitlin. "Okay," he said slowly. "Go ahead, baby." Kimmy tapped the screen. The video started. Caitlin's voice filled the room like poison dripping into a glass. "Relax, Daniel. The money's in my account. He'll think LaToya did it again. Once we're married, we'll transfer everything." Silence. Caitlin froze. Her mouth hung open just slightly, like her brain couldn't keep up with what her voice had just confessed. Fred's mug slipped from his hand and shattered on the hardwood floor. He stared at Caitlin, eyes narrowing. His voice dropped low. "Is that real?" Caitlin opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Kimmy pulled her line close. "You little brat." Caitlin shrieked, lunging forward. Fred stepped between them before security could react. His arm shot out like a shield. "Don't touch her." Caitlin's eyes burned with fury. Her mask, the sweet smile, the perfect laugh, the tears she'd always summoned on cue crumbled. All that remained was rage and fear. Security moved in, but Fred didn't look away from her. "I trusted you," he said, voice trembling. "I was going to give you everything, and you were stealing it behind my back. She made me look bad." Caitlin screamed, pointing at LaToya. "Everyone believed her over me." Fred shook his head. "No, you made yourself look bad, and I let it happen. That's on me." He turned slightly, gesturing toward the door. "Get out of my house." Caitlin looked at him like she didn't recognize him, but when no one moved to stop her, she backed away slowly, her heels clicking against the tile like a clock running out of time. Silence followed. Fred turned toward LaToya, eyes red, voice raw. "I'm sorry for not listening, for letting her." LaToya held up a hand gently. "Don't apologize to me. Apologize to the one who saw it all before we did." She looked down at Kimmy, who was still holding her lion, face solemn. Fred dropped to his knees in front of his daughter. "Thank you," he whispered. "You were braver than all of us." Kimmy leaned forward and wrapped her arms around his neck. "Miss LaToya says the truth never stays hidden. Jesus always brings it out." Fred nodded, tears falling freely now. And somewhere in the quiet, truth finally stood tall, undeniable, unshaken, and free. The cameras clicked before the first word was spoken. News vans lined the front gates of the Watson estate, just like they had weeks ago. But this time, they weren't here for scandal. They were here for truth. Fred stood behind a podium on the mansion's stone patio, the sun warm on his shoulders. To his right stood LaToya, dignified, calm, hands clasped in front of her, and beside her, holding tightly to her side, was Kimmy. Fred took a breath. "My former fiancée," he began, "framed an innocent woman. She manipulated my trust. She betrayed our family. But the real theft here wasn't money, it was trust. And worse, it was the dignity of a woman who served our home with grace and humility." LaToya glanced downward, not from shame, but from the weight of being seen. Fred continued, voice steady now. "Today, I stand with Miss LaToya Robinson, not just to clear her name, but to say publicly I was wrong, and I'm grateful my daughter had the courage I lacked." The media murmured. A few flashes sparked. Fred stepped back. LaToya moved forward, eyes sweeping over the crowd of microphones and flashing lights. "I accept your apology," she said, "but forgiveness isn't for those who deserve it. It's for those who need peace. That's what Jesus teaches us." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "I forgive Caitlin, and I forgive every whisperer that believed the worst about me, because I want my daughter to grow up watching a mother who walks in grace, not in bitterness." Kimmy beamed. "See, Daddy? Miss LaToya's heart is gold." Fred laughed softly, blinking back tears. Weeks passed, and slowly, the Watson house began to feel like a home. The tension was gone. The silence that once felt cold now gave way to warmth. Laughter echoed in the halls again. The roses out back had begun to bloom. LaToya wasn't the janitor anymore. She now managed the entire household staff, trusted, respected, and honored. Her touch was everywhere, not just in cleanliness, but in the spirit of the place. Fred visited her mother's community center one Saturday afternoon. He didn't come with cameras, just a quiet checkbook and a heart full of conviction. He offered to fund a new scholarship in Kimmy's name, for kids who, like her, believed in truth before anyone else did. One golden evening, LaToya knelt beside Kimmy in the garden, helping her press soft soil around newly planted rose stems. Kimmy looked up, her eyes glowing. "Can I call you Mom now?" LaToya's hands froze in the dirt. Her breath caught. Tears pooled in her eyes as she looked into the little girl's hopeful face. "If that's what your heart says," she whispered, voice trembling, "then yes." Kimmy leaned in, wrapping her arms around her. "It is," and as the sun dipped behind the trees, painting the sky in colors only God could dream up, truth stood tall, not needing permission to exist, only the courage to be spoken.
If this story moved you, like, share, and subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Remember, John 8:32. The truth will set you free.